Joining us now, our NHL insider on Wednesdays from TSN and the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, part of the Go-Goat Sports family of podcasts. Here is our friend, Mr. Darren Dreger. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a developing week, isn't it? And that's good and it's bad. I mean, speculation isn't a terrible thing, but when you get this close to a trade deadline, it becomes a little bit more challenging to separate fact from fiction because managers, your sources are all being inundated by the speculation. So once you start to see the players tumble a little bit, and maybe we've seen that increase a tad in the first few days of this week, then things start to intensify with the reality of some of the conversations. So I'm looking forward to the weekend.
I'm sure Rutherford and Alvin would never be cheering against their team for wins and losses. But that being said, if the Canucks had punted a bunch of games here recently, man, it would have been just so much more clear, at least for Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin, what they needed to do in this week. This team is just playing lights out right now, and they're winning the games that they should. Yeah. They're competitive in the games that are hard, and so understandably, this is walking a razor's edge, I'm sure, for Canucks management, who are trying to leave their own stamp, but maybe now is not the time to leave their stamp on this team.
No, and look, that's a fair assessment. That's real. That emotion is invested, not just by management. I mean, there's a healthy level of respect for what the players have accomplished to this point. I mean, the response when they made the management and the coaching change and how the players bought into Bruce Boudreau immediately and how they continue to fight to try and lock down a playoff spot. So from a management standpoint, how do you take that away? You can look into the future and you can see some of the financial hurdles that, are evident for the Vancouver Canucks moving forward. We can look at the roster and we can come up with a list of holes and areas of need and concern that are going to have to be addressed. And maybe in part, some of that is going to get dealt with between now and Monday and the trade deadline, but not at the expense of the remainder of this season and trying to lock down that playoff spot, because the experience matters. And just the ingredient of belief, right? The fact that these guys actually believe that they are playoff worthy, I don't think management has any interest in taking that away. That's not to say that Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford and the management group of the Canucks aren't going to be busy. I just don't think that the sexy names that we've been talking about for several weeks now, like JT Miller or even Brock Boeser or Connor Garland, Tanner Pearson, go down the list, are likely going to be moved. They'll continue to listen. That's just doing what your job is as a member of that management group. But those are important pieces that matter and are meaningful to the Vancouver Canucks trying to, again, nail down a playoff spot.
Darren, I asked this question with some trepidation, but we're starting to see it from our listeners. And let's face it, there is history here that the Vancouver Canucks ownership does have to own. Yeah. They ransacked their organization, let go so many people. They turned the taps off on hockey operations that one off season with Markstrom and Tanev and Stetcher and others. Is there any part of this that is ownership and playoff revenue driven? Give our best foot forward in the last 20 games, as close as they've been in the playoffs, for the sake of recapturing all those lost revenues from the pandemic. And of course, no live audiences.
Well, look, I can't say no because I haven't directly asked Francesco Aquilini or ownership of the Vancouver Canucks. And make no mistake, basically every owner in the National Hockey League does have influence over management, right? I mean, we all have bosses, and that includes the president of hockey operations and the general manager. So I would believe that the Aquilinis have input. And, I even if that premise is even remotely true, is it bad? I mean, the Canadian markets, above all the 32 markets in the National Hockey League, had barren landscape for a good stretch of time. Tens of millions of dollars were lost. More than that, frankly, when you look at the tickets in Vancouver and certainly Toronto and Montreal, go down the list, right? So even if that's remotely plausible, which probably is, I understand it, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either, right? Again, we just talked about the belief inside that room and not taking away the opportunity of a group of players that have worked so hard to claw their way back into playoff contention. So now you're going to take it away because you're worrying more about the long-term success of the organization. Oh, Here's Tiny, the Ray and Dregs mascot. I don't know if you guys can hear the background. Obviously, they've got a delivery.
I want to take it away from the fans too, Darren. I mean, there's a large segment of the fan base who's on board with this.
Couldn't agree more. And that's why, and I'm not suggesting, Matt, that you're taking a run at ownership for being selfish, for trying to generate revenue potentially at the expense of the roster. I don't think that this is that at all. But why can't the two work hand in hand? You've got a roster that is working of late. Is it a roster that's going to win a Stanley Cup in the foreseeable future? Probably not. Not entirely sure. It's going to need some attention, but that attention is going to happen. Whether it's in the next few days or most definitely it's going to happen in the offseason.
All right, let's talk if there's any contract extension business going on right now with the Vancouver Canucks. And, of course, the two names there are Brock Boeser, the RFA to be with the troublesome qualifying offer of 7.5. And, of course, Tyler Motte, the UFA to be or potential trade target. What are you hearing on those two wingers?
Well, I feel like it's relatively quiet. But, again, just knowing Rutherford, the way I know him and how he goes about his business, he is always educated. Patrick Allvin the same. I mean, the two kind of work hand in hand and have since their Pittsburgh days. They're not going into this trade deadline cold or blind. And in Boeser's case, it's different, right? Because you know what the qualifying offer is. And so does it really matter? And from Boeser's perspective and his camp, why would you want to engage at this point? Like, why would you want to? You're probably not going to extend unless the Vancouver Canucks make you just a wild offer of extension that solidifies your place. And I just don't think Vancouver's going to do that anytime soon. I keep hearing Motte's name more and more, in terms of depth forwards that could be available. Vancouver likes what Motte brings to the equation. But when we're looking at the real pieces that could be in play, maybe moved, he'd be on my list. Not guaranteeing that he gets moved. Again, whatever the value is placed on Motte, that's what it's going to be. But I look at Halak. I mean, we've speculated openly there. A little bit tricky because of the contract protection. I know that there have been teams that have considered taking a run at Halak. Don't believe any offers have been made. We'll see what the weekend brings. And then you've got three affordable defensemen in Tucker Poolman and Travis Hamonic and Luke Schenn. And Hamonic is a piece that could be interesting. He could be because of how some teams view where he can be positioned. If he's your third pairing guy, then you're probably pretty good defensively, but he has the ability to play a little bit higher up. And in Luke Schenn, you get the abundance of character. So beyond the guys that you mentioned and the contract extensions that are going to have to get dealt with, the players that I just mentioned are primarily the players I think that Vancouver believes are the ones that are most likely going to draw attention.
And yet, overall, the temperature still seems to be rather cool league-wide.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
Is it, pertains to the Vancouver Canucks or anybody else. And I find it a little bit odd, Darren, because the Eastern Conference is maybe this is why, is so wrapped up. Like, it's done. The playoff teams are known. But you're still jockeying for position there. Yeah. You're still wondering if you're a contender. And there's a bunch of teams that are in play in the West. And is this old school reticence to trade within your conference and your division too that's cooling this, that nobody really wants to give to these teams because they anticipate battling them in years to come?
I mean, if that's the case, I think it's a one-off, maybe. Look, it all is related to the asking price. And the buyers continually tell us that the asking price on name the players is just too high. You look at the trade that went down today between the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers with Vetrano going to the New York Rangers. I can guarantee you that Bill Zito and the Florida Panthers thought they were getting more than a low fourth-round pick for Frankie Vetrano. I mean, he's a decent enough player. He's going to help the New York Rangers from a depth standpoint up front. But, Florida probably feels like, look, we've got some heavy lifting that needs to get done here, so we better shed as much cap space as we can. Now, in theory, let's see what the New York Rangers do, right? It's not the New York Rangers could absolutely be a threat to the Florida Panthers in the East. But Florida makes a deal with a potential rival because it was a deal that helped them shed some salary cap space. So I think that's become less and less in the salary cap era, to be fair. And where you're positioned too. You're not going to get one playoff team to help another playoff team in the East, not or in the West for that matter too. But Boston, Montreal doing deals, Toronto, Montreal doing deals, Vancouver, Edmonton, Vancouver, Calgary. I mean, what makes you better, I think, is what gets things moving.
We seem to have a fair bit of Leaf content in the press box here at Rogers Arena, and I think there's been a fair bit of Canucks content in the scouts box, the press box there in Toronto. Could you see the two teams getting together on a deal between now and Monday?
Yeah, Vancouver and Toronto. Yeah, I mean, it's possible for sure. I can tell you that as much speculation as there's been around the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're considering all their options. I still believe firmly that they do not want to trade their first-round pick. So if you're not trading a first-round pick in today's market and you're looking for a defenseman, then you're probably not going to get that defenseman unless you're giving a second, you're giving a prospect. I mean, there are different dynamics that can be employed here. So maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs are one of those teams that are looking at one of those defensemen that I talked about that are cheaper value. They need Jake Muzzin to come back healthy. He's making progress, but they need him to get healthy before the end of the regular season. I think he's relatively close. They played Ilya Lyubushkin on the top pairing with Morgan Rielly against the Dallas Stars last night, Tuesday night. He did fine. I mean, he's a physical beast out there. He plays a real simple, kind of lumbering game, but he doesn't need to be fancy, and that allows Morgan to get more active on the offensive side. So I think that there was some experimentation against the Dallas Stars. And, then they had the kid Shalgren stand on his lid in goal, so maybe that has helped them take a little bit of pressure off that position as well. So honestly, guys, I don't know that there's a connection between Vancouver and Toronto. I think that this is teams just doing their due diligence. I don't believe that there's a connection between Toronto and Yarrow Halak. I mentioned goaltending earlier. So, again, this could be just two teams making sure that they've got the landscape covered.
Matt, can we turn our attention to outside the Vancouver Canucks for a second? And do you think there would be a world that if Bruce Boudreau is not coaching the Vancouver Canucks, he's about to sign up with the Vegas Golden Knights? Never have I been an endorser of the 60-plus game coaching change.
Right.
I mean, that's all they can do at this point, right? I mean, they're pretty capped out. There's not a lot of tweaking to the player personnel roster, and they need to do something, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it appears that way just where they're sitting in the standings in a precarious spot. But, just to throw it back at you guys, how many teams can afford to lose 9 pieces out of their lineup? And I'm talking about primary pieces.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
You're looking at Martinez on the back end. You're looking at Robin Leonard. You're looking at Mark Stone up front. I mean, the list has been crazy this year. And for long stretches, Max Pacioretty was out of the lineup. I mean, it has been one player after another. Now, I did listen to Pete DeBoer talk after the loss to the Winnipeg Jets, which hit him right between the eyes. That was a tough loss for the Vegas Golden Knights. And, I mean, he outwardly identified goaltending needs to be better, right? So, does Kelly McCrimmon have to find a way? How he does it, I don't know. He's got to peddle away draft picks or something in the pipeline, and nothing jumps to mind. Otherwise, where is he getting that piece that is at least going to buy them a little bit of insurance in goal? And it is a sensational story to think that Marc-Andre Fleury could find his way back to the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, they gave him away, right? Like, they gave him to the Chicago Blackhawks to alleviate salary cap strain. So I feel like that ship has sailed. I know when I checked with Vegas, when Robin Leonard was sent home from Buffalo back to Vegas, and they said it's not going to be a long-term thing. But I also know that they're really not getting healthy anytime soon. So, there's a level of pressure there. Bill Foley is a hands-on owner. He wants to win as much as any owner in pro sport, not getting any younger. So I'm sure that they're feeling the pressure. I don't know what they could do that would do anything in a dramatic fashion to turn around, because I'll tell you what, the reason that Gerard Gallant isn't coaching the Vegas Golden Knights is because Peter DeBoer became available. And Vegas just felt like if they didn't seize an opportunity to improve in an area, coaching, tactically above all else, that they would regret it. So with all due respect to Bruce, I mean, maybe it's something they consider at the end of the season. I've heard people speculate openly on the possibility of a coaching change in Vegas. Unless McCrimmon's going back to the bench, I don't think it's going to happen.
Lastly, from me, Dregs, and this may have changed dramatically here even this week with the injury to Jacob Chychrun, and I understand Thomas Hertl and the Sharks are having some discussion. Who do you anticipate will be the biggest piece to move between now and Monday?
Yeah, and I mean, no shocker, it'll be Giroux. He's got to get through the 1,000th game and then, finally make that determination. Those close to him say, he will be traded. He hasn't told anybody that yet, so we have to be skeptical. It feels like Florida is the fit for Giroux. I think Thomas Hertl is real close to signing the extension with the San Jose Sharks. I don't think he's going anywhere. Jake Chychrun, further medical evaluation could be on the ice later this week, unless they've uncovered something more heinous, even though they did say 2 to 4 weeks. Those, again, close to Chychrun, believe he will get traded. I tweeted earlier today that LA and Boston remain the front runners. I believe at least one or both of those teams have 3 assets in play on the table for Chychrun. So Bill Armstrong has said all along it'll be 4. Yeah, you've got 3 on the table. What's 4? Just throw another one in there and get the piece that you're trying to land. So, good stuff ahead. Let's hope it waits and holds until Monday.
Yeah, I'm sure. Of course, Jim Nill down in Dallas at John Klingberg now. He says, unless I'm getting absolutely blown away, I'm not trading him.
And for Colorado, Dregs, do they get a little bit of goaltending help or a little bit of scoring help? Because they've got the room to do that. Which do you think is more likely for them?
More likely would be a forward for me, Blake. Yeah. There's lots of potential there. I mean, we've talked all along about the Giroux-Colorado fit, and I'm not, dismissing that as a possibility. Of course it's possible. I just feel like Florida may have the inside track or the edge there. A lot of speculation on Andrew Kopp. Right. I think the New York Rangers had, if they don't still have interest in Andrew Kopp after the Vetrano trade, I'm not sure. Boston is another team. Colorado would be another. But if you're Winnipeg, come on, man. You're in the thick of it. I mean, you don't want Andrew Kopp to walk out as a free agent, and he's going to walk. I don't think he really has interest in staying in Winnipeg and signing. I think he's been bobbled around too much there. But now if you're Chevy, what do you do? That's a big win over Vegas. You're still in the mix. They might hold on and just take their chances with their own rentals in Kopp and Stastny.
Wonderful stuff, Dregs. Thanks for this today. I look forward to catching up next week after all the pieces fall into place.
All right, guys. Be well.
Thanks, Darren. Darren Dreger is our insurance policy against a bad segment because he's just so good all the time. But hey, Alteri doesn't provide that. They provide everything else. Everything else. Home, boat, pet, human insurance too, life, extended health benefits as well. Whatever it is you need covered, Alteri can be there for you. Alteri.ca, and you'll find that they are there for you. They know your name. They know what your needs are. They give you a custom-tailored insurance experience unlike anything you've had before. Experience the difference at Alteri Insurance because they're changing the conversation.